All right, we are live here with the man, the myth, David Osk. I'm going to get right into it because we actually have a short time frame today, and as we stated right before we went live, hey, if we can't deliver, good, clear action content in 10 minutes or maybe slightly over,
Yeah.
then we need to refine our process anyways. But we want to talk about uncertainty today, right? And I'm going to make a bold statement that I believe that uncertainty is the absolute greatest cause of failure in businesses, in relationships, personal failures. It's the greatest cause of self-sabotage and why we engage in self-defeating behaviors. And if you're not familiar psychologically with what uncertainty does to you, uncertainty essentially causes chaos within, right? Your brain recognizes uncertainty essentially as fear, right? Your brain likes familiarity. It likes prediction. It likes, where it doesn't have to expend too many resources. And so when it senses uncertainty, right, and uncertainty can show up in a variety of forms. It can show up in your relationship, right, when there's maybe some insecurity, some trust issues, when someone's mood is constantly fluctuating, right. There's not a predictability, and so there's that sense of the unknown. Uncertainty can show up in your health, right. You have some health issues, you're not sure what that means. It can show up in your business in a whole host of ways, and of course it can certainly show up as what we call self-uncertainty. And I'm going to describe that in a second, and why that form of uncertainty is actually the most debilitating and devastating form. And there's research to support this. But uncertainty is a massive figure. It's an existential problem. I'm going to throw a big term out there. David, we've heard this term unprecedented or unparalleled amount of uncertainty over this past year and a half. What does that mean to you? And, what's your experience of uncertainty?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, I look back at the last 18 months and my whole life is filled with it. We had, I sell products and, retail stores and so on. And when COVID hit, I mean, it was like, trajectory up and then just completely crashing down. So on a very financial, right, level, and money is pretty, like, I forget where I heard the term, but money is pretty close to air. You try to live without it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, talk about some external uncertainty there, and like, okay, what am I going to do right here? So this last 18 months has been just nothing but uncertainty on a very day-to-day level for me. I get it.
And as far as having tools, like, do you feel like that you were taught tools like, here's what you do when uncertainty arises, here's how you deal with it? Did you just have to figure it out on your own? How have you developed kind of strategies or tools for how to deal with uncertainty?
I think looking back, I think we had a couple of platitudes out there like, this too shall pass, or, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, that kind of thing. And at the same time, I'm like, well, am I tough? If I start acting, what tools are in my belt to actually make a difference in this situation? So there was so much internal uncertainty, within the external uncertainty. So I mean, up until, recently, I feel like I haven't had a real clear direction on how to handle it.
Yeah. I remember there was a time where I had some health issues. I went to go get some, blood work done, and the blood work came back in a way that was concerning. And I remember my doctor called me and said, one of the things that we're concerned about is, there's some markers here for potential leukemia, and that word immediately stood out. And I was like, what? But he said, the process to check on that would be to do a bone marrow aspiration. I had heard that is not the most pleasant thing to do. So he said we could, schedule that right away, get that checked out, or, I'm not too concerned, so we can wait, maybe 6 months, come back, check the blood work, and if it's still there.
Wait,
So initially I thought, let's do the 6-month thing, right? Whatever avoids the bone marrow aspiration. That lasted all of about, 24 hours, because the amount of anxiety that I felt just thinking about all the what ifs, right? I mean, I became so in tune with everything that was happening in my body. I was checking like things on my skin. I was an anxious wreck, right? And I thought, I don't care how uncomfortable that bone marrow aspiration is, just remove this uncertainty. And fortunately, I was very lucky that we went and got it tested, and that really was a very unpleasant process. I will say that. But getting clarity, just getting information on that was a massive relief. So was not very comfortable in sitting that type of uncertainty. And the same is true. I've been in relationships, right, where I didn't know, that someone was a partier and they went out and maybe they kept, relationships that I felt uncomfortable with. Just that sense of trying to trust when I'm not sure if I can trust someone, and that constant like knots in the stomach, right? And it becomes very difficult to think at that point. Some of those times I was in grad school and it was like, I got to write a 15-page paper, right? And I got to be able to really concentrate, and I can't. My brain is so flooded with cortisol and adrenaline and fear that I'm totally shut down at this point. And we know that's what happens with uncertainty, right? Is it literally gets you where you are operating out of your primitive brain, that lizard brain part of you. Yeah. And so it shuts down your ability. It's like you get tunnel vision, right? All you can see is the problem right in front of you. You lose the ability to see like the full spectrum of possibilities and options. You can't creatively problem solve. Your feelings and your thoughts get super rigid and inflexible. And so operating at that place is really pretty terrible. And yet I think there's a large number of people that operate out of that on a pretty regular basis, and they're just not maybe fully aware of it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a joke around here. When I start acting rigid, I go into cleaning mode. And guess who else is cleaning? Everybody in my house. I'm like, all right, let's go. It's kind of like, so if I say, hey guys, you want to, and I'm always pretty nice about it, but if I get into kind of, hey, let's go into the mudroom and start clearing things out, or let's start, Lisa automatically now, 22 years later, is like, how are you doing? You okay? and oftentimes I don't realize it. And I realize, there's a couple of other issues here that have massive uncertainty around them. And I'm really wanting to externally control something, just nail something down so I can grab onto something. And I don't think there's anybody alive who could not relate to that in some way.
Yeah, there was a period in college where I definitely had some obsessive compulsive. I had a disorder, and that largely is a byproduct, right, of just uncertainty and not knowing how to deal with it, and all the projections into the what ifs, and trying to find some mechanism of control right through it. And unfortunately, it feels like that the behaviors you engage in some way have these magical powers, but they really don't. It's just it's really terrible when uncertainty can get a grip on you. Yeah. And the most debilitating form, I know we talked about self-uncertainty, but that might not be a term, right, that a lot of people are familiar with. In many regards, information is the answer to uncertainty, right? Mm-hmm. Just like that health uncertainty, what I needed is more information on that. Financial uncertainty, right? Sometimes we just need to sit down with, our financial planner, or we need someone to help us understand, financial literacy or whatever it might be, a plan forward. With self-uncertainty, the tough thing is it cuts right, down to the bone of identity, right? So it makes you start to doubt your very self. And that becomes very difficult, right? Because you're operating out of yourself at all times. So if you don't trust yourself and you feel insecure and uncertainty is gripping you there, then it basically floods your ability to make great decisions in really just about any area of life, right? And so self-uncertainty is about not really feeling like you have a clear sense of strategy, right? A coherent sense of knowing how to respond. I see this a lot of times in relationships or businesses where when people get pushed, well, why did you do that? Or, what do you believe, or whatever it is. And if people don't have an answer for that, it tends to create a very rigid response, right? Because they're pushing back. If you don't know why you do what you do, you don't know what you believe, right, in that situation, or you have belief.
I think we lost Dr. Andy here. So I'll just kind of tie things up here a little bit as best I can. So Dr. Andy's talking about self-uncertainty. So what is the solution for self-uncertainty? What is the solution for uncertainty, that's in our lives on a daily basis? And so about a year and a half ago, I went through Dr. Andy's course called the Authentic Growth Blueprint. And what it did was to give me a real understanding of those things in my life that I valued most of all. So you kind of have a hierarchy of things that, that everybody would say that, that they hold dear in their life. But of course, that's unique to us as individuals. Why am I different from the person next to me, and so on? And hey, you're back.
Man, I knew my battery. I didn't realize it'd go that quickly, which was probably a good time, because it's surprising. I actually got to wrap things up. I think it's my computer's way of saying, "Hey, stop talking."
Yeah, I kind of narrated a little bit into, kind of segued into, then how do we deal with uncertainty in our lives, whether it's self-certainty or this external thing. And of course, starting to get back to the who, right? The identity that makes us,
Yeah.
unique. And because the way that I would deal with uncertainty is different from you. So maybe you can expound a bit more on how we, then kind of solve that problem. What tools do we have?
Yeah, I think that who am I question, right, really is so foundational, right? That when you have an answer for that, and I'm not saying that certainty is the answer to uncertainty. So, certainty is about developing, strong beliefs, convictions that you hold to be consistently true, reliable, right? And so when you're able to really anchor who you are to a couple of things that you just know to be so deeply true about yourself, what we do in our program is we anchor that to your values, right? To some of the character strengths that are deeply embedded in who you are that are important to you, right? And so that when who you are is anchored to these things, your values have significant emotional weight, right? They're things you're willing to fight for. They're things that you will fight against. They create a lot of momentum. And when you feel like you're out of alignment with that in your life, right, it's going to create a ton of conflict. You're going to feel deflated. Your energy is going to go down. So when you start to say these are the things that really matter, right? And there's tons of research. Susan David's covered this in some of her work. It's been covered in some research out of Stanford. When you do small, simple little things that just affirm your values day to day, you start to believe that you can overcome just about anything, right? You really develop this internal belief and narrative that I can overcome my circumstances. I can change them for the better. And that's amazing, right? Now all of a sudden you're operating from a place of, hey, there might be all this external uncertainty, but I'm operating from a place of internal clarity and certainty. And now I feel like I'm able to rise above and crush this. That is a complete game changer.
I love that. I love that. And here's an interesting thing is I feel like uncertainty is never going to go away, right? We're human. I mean, we get up, we sleep, and we kind of forget. I mean, it's just every day is a new day. Plus we have, just external things that are happening all the time. I mean, if you have a family or you work, with other people, I mean, you're going to experience uncertainty. So one thing that I have found in my life is that to expect it just feels kind of good, really. Just be like, yeah, I'm gonna bring that into my world here and not try to block it out. Just acknowledge it, but then get back to square one, right? What do I do with this? Well, now I know what to do with it. I have a whole lot of tools in my belt, standing on some bedrock that I know that this is something I'm going to say yes to far in advance, of this obstacle or opportunity even arising. And these are the things I'm going to say no to. And sometimes it's not that black and white, but at the same time, if I've noticed, for myself, if I don't have that, really, really deep understanding of what I value most of all, right? What's at the top, those things that I go to every single time, good luck.
Yeah. It's amazing. Out of Claremont University, they've done some really amazing work on the concept, sometimes referred to as personal uncertainty or self-uncertainty, right? And they really have shown how, the incredible effects and that being uncertain around who you are, around this identity, right? What you believe in, why you do what you do, self strategies, all these things, that it is so intolerable not to have certainty in that you feel this overwhelming need or urge to resolve it. And so if you don't have an answer internally, then you will start looking outside yourself, right? So you'll start to connect your identity to, your job, your income, what you do versus who you are, why you do things, right? I know people that are incredibly purpose driven and they have a really noble purpose, but that is completely engulfed who they are to the point where, personally, their personal well-being is a wreck. Their family relationships are a wreck. And so it might seem like, well, that's great, right? They have this really wonderful purpose and they must be really just doing really great. But it has, right? It has to start with who you are. It has to be the foundational place of where certainty is created. Because when that is really set, when I wake up each day, I just try and do small little affirmations of this is what's important, day by day in every way. I live out my values. I choose to move forward, towards them. And I try and throughout the day, think about them, right? I know people that have, little bracelets or they have different things, that have either the initials of their values or things like that. And it's amazing when I stop to reflect on those, how it strengthens me. And then it helps me to remember, what I'm intrinsically motivated to do, in situations, what strengths I have that I can rely on. And all of a sudden now, right, I'll be honest, I'm a naturally anxious person, right? Like As
Yeah.
a kid, anxiety has just been a part. And if my family tree, you looked on it, there's that is the one issue. There's a lot of anxiety on my
Yeah.
family tree. And so the ability to have tools on how to, deal with that anxiety, how to deal with that fear, and how to move forward anyways. I mean, it really has. And then to be able to start to equip my kids, right? To start to equip my clients, to start to equip people with these things, it completely changes your life when suddenly you're operating out of a place of feeling secure, trusting yourself, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure if you think about what it feels like to be in a trusting relationship, right? When you're with someone that you really, you trust them to do the right thing, right? You know that they care about you, and it's not for ulterior motives, right?
Yeah.
You know that they just have genuinely like great character. You feel safe in their presence. It allows you to just take a breath, relax, and just be who you are, right? Now imagine that you're operating in that same capacity, but that's how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
It's like taking a breath of fresh air and being able to recognize, I got this, right?
Yeah.
And when you start to trust yourself, it opens up a whole range of possibilities. And guess what? When you get challenged by your spouse, when you have business challenges and these things come at you, right? And you trust yourself to make the right decision, you start more organically and automatically leaning into, dealing with them and dealing with them in a way you're going to feel great about in the moment and the next day and the week ahead. So
Love that.
Any thoughts in wrapping this up?
I think the thing that was kind of rising to the top here is when, I've noticed that when I have uncertainty, I want to end the uncertainty quickly.
Yeah.
But what happens though is then, a virtue is kind of lost there with regards to patience. And if I would have just sat in it and had the courage, right, just to be, that's uncertainty here. That's okay. I know how to handle this. I'm, just feel like I'm stable here. I'm good. Let's let this ride out, because if I am patient, the odds are I'm going to make a better decision. And I think that the stability factor within myself, the self-trust, allows for me to just acknowledge what it is, because the patience, oftentimes that uncertainty will just resolve itself, or there's actually a better option available, a day or two later, or a week later, even, or a month later, that kind of thing. And I feel like if I have more courage, in and of myself, right, just to understand, hey, I'm okay here, then I end up getting a better answer at the end of that uncertainty, a better result. And as opposed to a knee-jerk reaction, I'm getting out of this fire.
Yeah. And maybe this is stereotypical, but I find, at least in my experience working with, men and women, that I think some of the men leaders I work with struggle with this more. And I think I can appreciate, right? Sometimes when I feel this fear, I feel like I'm supposed to be tough, right? And I'm supposed to just kind of grin and bear it and move into it. The problem is that when we do that, but we haven't resolved the uncertainty, is we might do this tough thing, but we're doing it again through this rigid lens, right? And that's where you start to see, and you can make some really bad decisions, right? Where, you really end up, hurting people. Your communication becomes a lot more inconsistent and unclear, right? And as a leader, that's not a good thing. Again, when I'm operating in that place where I know what's most important, I feel secure within that. My ability to communicate clearly and prioritize effectively and do those things that are really essential to being a great leader, that they really rise up to the top. And I'll make this last claim, and this is work we do every day, right? When we start to see people, that light bulb go on and they start to recognize, right, oh, they feel really grounded and secure and anchored in who they are. And all of a sudden they start to recognize, these self-limiting beliefs and all these things that have capped their potential, right? That it's nonsense, that they can absolutely rise above that. So I believe that the ability to have tools, to have the language, right, to consistently rise above uncertainty is the greatest tool you can have to really create limitless growth, right? And if you don't figure out how to deal with this, I'll make this claim that it will severely limit your ability to grow in your business, your life, your relationships. This is the key factor, right? The ability to know how to deal with this uncertainty, because it's an existential reality. Every day we're dealing with uncertainty in a variety of ways. And so the ability to resolve the most fundamental source of certainty within ourselves is the key to reaching your full potential.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, I sure don't need to add anything to that. I mean, you always say the who before your why, because if you don't understand the who, your why is not going to make sense. It's going to be someone else's. And you said it really clearly there. I couldn't agree more.
Well, I know we're going to wrap up in just about 20 minutes, right? So, we'd love if anybody has questions, if anybody ends up listening to this later, if you want tools, right? If you want a process, a protocol to follow that really will help you, your family, your spouse, and really we love doing this in businesses, right? When you start having an entire team, your leadership team is all operating right out of that place of certainty, right? So they have greater clarity. They're able to quickly identify, problem solving, where they have a full range of creative, options in front of them, and they start to be able to quickly identify what matters most. You really are going to have a leadership team that's going to inspire the people, right, that we're working with. They're going to make better choices. It's going to lead your business further into the future in a way that's virtuous, that's consistently growing. So we'd love to.
Solid team. Yeah, it's a solidity that is, I mean, and then the opposite of that, right? Fragmentation, just a bunch of chaos and drama. Yeah, and who wants that? Yep. So great word.
Yeah. All right, brother. I hope you have an awesome weekend, and appreciate it, man. I love having these talks.
Me too.
Take
Thanks.
Care.